Okay, I am calling to order the August 26th Assessors Meeting for the town of Lakeville. It is 4:35 p.m. I am reading into the record that this is a public meeting of the Board of Assessors and it's being held remotely. However, to view this meeting in progress, please go to facebook.com/LakeCAM. You do not need a Facebook account to view the meeting. The meeting will also be recorded and available to be viewed at a later date. So, Linda had included or had forwarded us at some point, I believe, the minutes from the July 15th meeting. So I know we're going to need a motion to approve that, if anyone's so inclined, and then a second.
Second.
Okay, I guess I made the motion, right, Dave? Dave's laughing over there. I'll make that motion and Mr. Pink will second it. So we still have to do our roll call vote on these remote meetings. So Dave Lamoureux?
Here. Aye.
Aye. There you go. Keep smiling, Dave. John Pink?
Aye.
And I am in favor as well. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Haral now. And let's go through the review of the smart growth report. Or actually, I think David's going to review.
Yes,
right?
David's going to speak to that. He took the lead on the project, so.
If you don't mind, just for everyone's edification, maybe just explain what the smart growth report is. This isn't something that every community does. We're one of only, I believe, a couple in the state. So maybe don't prolong it, but just give us the overview as to what it is and then get into it. Thanks.
So very quickly before David takes over, we're required annually to file a report to the Department of Revenue on so-called 40S, that is smart growth projects in the town. The town receives reimbursement for essentially the impact of those affordable housing units. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave because he did the homework.
Sure. Can you just unmute yourself?
Yes.
Thanks.
You're muted, Dave.
Mute.
Thank you. So I worked with Ari and Nate in the building department to go through and determine where our smart growth districts were. I think in the past we had not been fully counting all of the growth in those districts. And so we went through and meticulously cataloged every single address that is associated with our smart growth district. The result was that for this year's submission, we're going to receive in those receipts that Harold, those reimbursements that Harold referenced, something to the tune of $448,000 from the Commonwealth. That's a $224,000 increase from last year. So I think we're in a really good place with that. The district is really well defined now. It is highlighted on our maps here, but I went back and looked at some historical data to really uncover what the full picture is. And something to note is that the smart growth districts are defined based on their density and the inclusion of affordable housing options. However, we don't just count the affordable housing options. We count all of the property within the district there. So we get a handle on the taxes, the property taxes for the real estate, as well as the motor vehicle excise tax in the district. And that gets us to our 448,000 or so. So that's where that stands. And I think we're in a good place for next year to really be able to bang through that project quickly.
A quick question, Dave. Obviously, good job in getting all the information together. And I'll also want to at least recognize Nate and Ari's role in, three departments kind of coordinating and getting us the accurate information, which obviously means the town doesn't leave any money on the table. But going forward, if there are additional properties that go into this, do we have a kind of a protocol or a process to make sure that we don't miss. I know, I know Nate in particular is, I've talked to him about this in the past, that it's making sure departments interact and talk to each other so that we don't have issues like this come up. Is how do we make sure that we don't miss any and then they are captured? Because we don't know unless we're informed, correct?
Yeah, and so Ari made clear that he expected that any kind of growth in those districts would be reported to us, and Nate will help facilitate that for the future. So I'll connect with him at this time next year to get a handle on what has happened in the district. You can't add these properties to the report until they have their occupancy certificate. So he would be sort of that last person to approve that. So he would have a good handle on that.
So it sounds like what we'll do is annually at this point in time, circle back with the building department, know the designated area and cross-reference. So we'll need to be proactive on our part to make sure that we circle back with them each year at report time, we'll call it, as opposed to there's nothing where we add these during the course of the year.
Yeah, we'll probably do it. So they need their occupancy certificate by October 1st of the previous calendar year. So we can get ahead of it.
Honestly, I have no personal preference to how we do it. I'm just curious as to whether it's just going to be an annual process where we go back and say, listen, here's what we had last year. What's the new growth in that district? So we can add however many parcels of property do have their occupancy permits. So that it's not that we're going to get notified during the course of the year. We may or may not, but realistically, what we're going to do to make sure we don't miss it is at the end of each year, go back and say, here's the section that's included in the district and what's new versus last year, and add those in.
Exactly. Yeah. And we already have some of those through the work that Nate and I did, but yeah, it'll be a big batch at some point. Probably not quite as close to report date as we were this year. Probably a little bit more ahead of time, early summer, late spring, that zone right there.
Okay. Thanks.
Is this in state reimbursement annual, or is it just a one-time thing? Once a project is completed, you get a one-time reimbursement?
It's annual.
Okay.
So the biggest hurdle we've crossed at this point, we've created the kind of the foundational list or the base list, and now it's just a matter of, nothing's going to go away from that list realistically. It's just a matter of making sure we incorporate and add into whatever we need to going forward. And so I think we're in much better shape than we were, and the town's obviously the beneficiary because we're going to get significant. We're talking over $200,000, I think, based on your numbers of additional reimbursement this year.
Yeah, more than double.
So, any other questions or comments? Okay, thanks, Dave. Review of assessments to sales ratio statistics, which I'm sure we've all been losing sleep over waiting for Harald's report. So, all right, Harald, let us hear it.
So I need LakeCAM to designate me as a.
Harald, you're
And
muted.
mute yourself.
Although I will have to say, you were talking loud enough that you must be in the same room as someone else on this call, because we could hear you very, very minimally.
Yeah. So I need share access, which means I've got to be made host.
Kevin, can you handle that?
It should work now.
Do I need to expand this? Here,
Perfect.
everybody see these numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the time of the year where we look at our assessments relative to sales that have transpired. The sales period that we're looking at is calendar year 2020. And essentially in this study, we're comparing our assessments to sale prices for those, in this case, the largest, by far the largest class of property in town, the single family homes, and see how those ratios speak to us. David crunched all the numbers here. He and I have collaborated a bit on next steps, but really we wanted to share this information with the board first before we proceed with the next step, which is to modify the system of land and billing tables that drive our valuation system, producing our new assessments for this fiscal year. So you see that we have 198 single-family sales. That's actually a large number of sales. I looked back at prior years, and I think we were hovering around 150, 160 sales. So we had a strong sales period in calendar 2020. Overall, our assessments are running at about 90% of sale price. So let me just comment, maybe for David's benefit. This median assessment ratio looks at the 198 sales, the assessed value divided by the sale price. Those ASRs, or assessment to sale ratios, are ranked from low ratio to high ratio. The midpoint, or the median, is how we measure our level of value. So again, overall, our assessments are running at about 90% of sale price. However, when we look at the next grouping here, we take those same 198 sales and we divvy those up by sales quarters. So quarter one would be January, February, March of 2020, and so forth through the year. You'll see that there's actually a progression. And when we get to the fourth quarter of 2020, our assessment level actually drops to 84%. So it's not so much that our assessments have dropped. In fact, our assessments are the same. It's the sales prices relative to those sales that where we see a spread. And of course, that implies then a strong market appreciation. I think we're all aware at this point that the real estate market has boomed. And that trend, of course, continues into 2021. But the other challenge we have is in seeing almost a 10% appreciation in property values from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. That plays into our coefficient of dispersion, which is a measure of the average variation between our median and our sales in any of these groupings. Those CODs are unusually high, and they're high in part because we have this volatile market, and people are bidding up asking prices. I'm seeing this in all of the towns. Normally, out of the box, we would see a COD of around maybe 9%, but we have, with the volatility of the market, we have very high variance or variations in those assessment to sale ratios. I'll take a pause for a second if anybody has questions.
I think I followed it. One more time. Can you explain the COD one more time? I think I followed it, but just say it again, please.
Yeah, so the COD, short for coefficient of dispersion, is a measure of the average variation. Now we're focusing on the ASRs, the average variation between an actual ASR for a particular sale and the median. So if, for example, the COD was 0, it would imply that in every case, the assessment to sale ratio for a sale equals the median. So if we're at, say, 90%, it means that all of our ASRs for the 198 sales are at 90%. Now, we're always going to have some variance. I won't go into a dissertation about the factors that play into that variance, but one of those factors is market variability and volatility. So the challenge, though, is that we, in the mass appraisal realm, have to both bring our median into compliance with DOR standards and come to terms with this high COD to bring this down. In this class, our COD, the single family class, the upper limit to the COD is 10.99%. Did that help at all, David?
Yeah, I follow. Thank you.
So Rob, just quickly, so just I'm probably getting ahead of your report here, but this is for 2020. These are 2020 numbers. Obviously, we're approaching the third quarter of 2021, which we won't be doing until next year.
Right.
But this differential is only going to exponentially get worse based on what's happened. And I only use worse for lack of a better term. But this issue is just going to become more. There's going to be a greater disparity going forward. So when we do talk about, when we set these numbers, we really need to take into consideration the fact that whatever we do now is, unless we do enough of it, we're going to have to be making a major adjustment when we are doing this next year again. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we begin to do with this analysis is start looking at potential patterns of over and under assessment, places where we can actually address emerging inequities by making appropriate land and building rate changes. This will become evident as we go through all of this. So the next tier of ratios that I want to point to is the sale price quartiles. Basically, what we're doing here is taking the 198 sales, arraying those sales from low sale price to high sale price, and then reporting on the ASRs for the low end versus the high end and the middle tier. And what emerges here is nothing significant except for maybe the lower end of the market being over assessed relative to the other quartiles. But we should see this pattern play out in some of the other segmentation that we do of these statistics. And I'm not sure that I hold much stock in this 95% ratio on the lowest quartile. So we'll move on if we can here. So one further set of statistics that we look at lot size. A 70,000 square foot lot is the standard building lot in Lakeville. So the statistic looks at essentially 70,000 square foot lots or smaller. The smaller lots are typically grandfathered lots, older parts of town. We see here that we've got a median ratio of 86% versus properties that sit on larger acreage lots where we're at 92%. So that might, in our mind, as David and I move forward in the coming weeks, temper a little bit our view on what we want to do with land values. Economic neighborhood, this is our way of, in the assessing world, of dealing with location. You'll see these neighborhood groupings from 140, a neighborhood 140 to a neighborhood 400 on the high end. Just the progression here takes you from least desirable areas to most desirable. And these most desirable are typically are better waterfront locations. And so a few things to point out here. Our lowest end neighborhood, 140, 150 values relative to sale prices quite low here. Means we might have to adjust upwards a bit the location adjustment that we make for properties that are in those low or lesser neighborhoods. But what's curious here is we've got 7 sales of, these are the high end. Well, let me just say that any of our 300 series economic neighborhoods are basically lakefront, waterfront. And the bulk of our waterfronts are in this 300 to 342 designation. And we see that the assessment trend is similar to what we see in other neighborhood groupings. But interestingly, we're a little on the high side on our waterfronts. Now, I'm perplexed by that because in the past we've always been low and very low. So we'll have to dig into that a little bit more as we go through this interim reval process. Any questions up to this point? Hearing none, I'll go on to building style. We've got ratios all over the board here. But what's interesting is bungalow, which is a more modest style. Our ratio is quite low. If I go to our cottages, these are really our lesser properties in town, also quite low. What this could speak to is the fact that these are typically entry-level homes, and people are just to get into town paying a premium for these properties that we hadn't seen before. Everything else follows suit. Modern contemporaries a little high, but one of the things we have to be real careful here is that our sample sizes for most of our styles are quite low. You could have, for example, if I pick on cottages, we had 8 sales. If you introduced a 9th sale, that median could potentially jump up to maybe 70 or 80%. When you have a small sample size, those median ratios tend to be very volatile. All of this is a little unnerving because, like I said earlier, usually we see out of the box these medians fairly consistent and relatively low CODs. So all of this again speaks to just a crazy market. Construction grade. Construction grade looks at the quality of construction. And again, there's a progression. A grade 40 would be our lowest, poorest quality homes, kind of our standard, what we see the most of in Lakeville are homes that have an average to an average plus grade. So the 100 grade is our average grade home. That's probably typical of homes that were constructed back in the 60s, maybe 70s. Most of our new construction tends to be in the 120 grade. Let me just comment here. These grade numbers, these are vestige numbers that were part of our system for many years. Not sure who established these grades. In most towns, we use a whole different grading system. We would have average, for example, good, very good. But maybe at some point we might look to simplify our grading system. But
How big of an undertaking is that, Harold?
Without the help of a programmer, a pretty big job, because you have to touch 4,000 some records individually and make those changes.
Okay, so it would be something we need to contract to have an outside programmer potentially come in.
Yeah, honestly, it's not a big issue, or hasn't been, but wait till I kick the bucket, John, and then I'll.
We do have something further down the agenda that has to do with your schedule. So I don't know if that's a prelude to.
No.
hopefully not, but.
So we look at these same ratios by building size, and it is interesting. There is a progression here. As you get to bigger homes, the ratios increase, suggesting that the lower end of the market is actually a bit stronger relative to the top end of the market. All of that, all these patterns that emerge, we want to, we'll have to respond to with table adjustments. And then finally, we look at the age of homes. And yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here with 2020 plus. I think, David, we might need to see if there aren't homes that are partially complete, but yeah, this is suspect. I would not expect this ratio to be that low, and in fact, we might have some sales that need to be eliminated from the analysis. Well, one of the next steps we'll look at is to look at outliers, outlier ratios. That is, homes that are either assessed far above sale price or far below sale price. So let me just comment then about the next steps. Well, next step is really to get an endorsement from the board on bringing our median assessment level up. If tail end of 2020, we're at 84%. This, to pass muster with DOR, we've got to get at least up to 90% in all of these categories. I'm going to suggest that we target lifting values on average somewhere around 6 to 7%.
Harald, where were we last year?
Well, we always try to land on about 95% at the end of our reval.
Okay, so let me ask this question. I mean, obviously, we need to be above 0.9. We were at, well, we tried to land on, I think our goal was to land on 9.95 or 0.96 last year, correct?
Right? Yes.
So I'll assume it's not an exact science, but I assume we ended up in that area. Yet now we're looking where we're back down to 0.9, but that 0.9 is on 2020, which at the beginning of 2020, the real estate market wasn't anything compared to what it was at the end of 2020. It's to date in 2021. So, and
if I could point out that trajectory going into,
because this has an impact on valuations and what's going to happen to people's values of their homes when they get their assessments. And if we go up to 0.95 or 0.96 this year, I'm just assuming that we know we're going to have another increase next year based on what the market's doing. Again, this, not to be repetitive, but this is 2020. Do we potentially try to be cognizant of that and maybe bite off a little bit more this year? So, because we're going to get, rightfully so. I mean, if I get my assessment, my value would shot up. I'm going to question it, type of a deal. But it sounds like we're going to be having the same duplicate conversation next year. Again, we're almost at third quarter, and it's slowing a little bit, but not to the degree where it's going to fall off in the fourth quarter of 2021. Hopefully, my little spiel there made sense to the board and you.
I somewhat agree with John because the assessed value is always behind what's actually happening. And the average homeowner doesn't necessarily understand that or want to hear that. So if the market does cool off when we're sending out assessments for 2023, if we have to go up to meet these state guidelines at that point, when the market's not necessarily as hot, it might be harder to swallow. Right now, when everybody knows the market's crazy, maybe it's a little bit easier to accept that.
I think that's a good point. A lot of this is about crystal balling the future and how this all plays out.
Well, the good thing from our role is it is crystal balling to some degree, but we're crystal balling, not really crystal balling, because we know at this point, we're almost through the third quarter of 2021. So we already know what it's going to look like next year, comparatively speaking. We know the numbers are up this year versus last year. The crystal balling is what's going to happen the following year. I don't know. It could continue to rise. Maybe all of a sudden there's, interest, they do something with interest rates and more money gets pumped into the economy and these rates go even higher. But I think, Dave was a little more succinct in it, is that, we're already going to have people saying, oh, why is my assessed value going up? And I'd rather have to deal with that once. And even more so, if the market does go the other way, they're really going to be, wondering why is it going up? Because they're, unless you're doing this all the time, you're saying, wait a minute, I know what my house is worth. Yeah, maybe it was worth that 2 years ago. Well, unfortunately, your assessed value is based on historical data. It's not based on the here and now, what the market's doing now. So I just think we should be cognizant of that. And we may even need to shoot for higher than that 0.595, 96, knowing that at the end, when we're sitting here next year, hopefully by taking our medicine now, maybe we'll be close to 0.9. So if we have to do anything, it'll be a minimal amount, or maybe we'll get lucky and it'll be above 0.9 enough that we can push off making any adjustments to the following year when things correct themselves.
Of course, the beauty of our system here in Massachusetts is that we make appropriate adjustments to the tax rate. So if we raise assessments 10%, the tax rates would go down, maybe not 10%, but certainly something approaching that.
I agree, but people don't want to pay taxes anyway, so they always look for the reason as to how I can change that, and their first thought is, well, you're assessing my house at 400. I could not get 400 on the market now. Yeah, but you could have got 400 18 months ago, which is what we need to base our assessments on. And it works. Unfortunately for us, no one ever calls us in these years when everything's going up and their value was assessed at, 200,000 below what the market is. They only pay attention when it goes the other way. But that's human nature.
So I'd like if my colleague David's willing, he's fairly close to the local real estate market. What are you seeing, David? You want to unmute yourself and I'll let you respond.
Yeah, I think John already mentioned that he's seeing things slow down, and I think that's true. Where 3-6 months ago we were seeing properties selling all over Massachusetts for 15 to 20% above asking price.
Dave,
we're now.
Harald needs to mute himself because we're getting feedback. Somebody needs to mute. You're in the same room.
Can you mute yourself? There we go. Yeah. So, as I was saying, I think, we were seeing 3 and 6 months ago, 10, 15, 20% above asking price. Now, it's more like 3 to 5% above asking price. It's still a hot market. There's not a lot of inventory and there's still a lot of buyers. So there are still some very competitive offers being put forward in a lot of these, in a lot of markets around us. But it's definitely slowing down. Inventory has increased about 20% over the last 2 months or so. So, I think it's going to level off. I don't know that it's going to drop off. But, again, the fall and the winter are usually our slower months for real estate sales. And so, I think, again, it is a crystal ball kind of exercise. We think this is what's going to happen, but we're not entirely sure. We won't know until it happens. And particularly with the changing situation with COVID, I think that people are starting to get hesitant to put their home on the market again. I think they're seeing rates increase, and they're they're thinking that it's going to be like it was 18 months ago. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think sellers and buyers often look for ways to get out of the market if they're feeling hesitant to begin with. So I think that could impact it moving forward. But I think in summary, it's cooled down, but it's still pretty hot.
So Harald, at this point, are you looking for a recommendation from us, or are you?
Yeah, what I'd like to suggest is that we lift our valuation sufficient to get us to that median 0.95 target value assessment to sale ratio as we have in the past, and that will require increases in assessments, probably to the tune of about 7 to 10%.
Honestly, I'm inclined to go higher. And again, the only reason I'm inclined to go higher is because we're basing our numbers off of 2020 numbers.
If you simply take the fourth quarter at 84 and you want to get to 95, that's 11, right?
Yeah, it's actually probably more like 13, but yes, David, in that ballpark.
Okay. I'm kind of on board with John for the same reason we talked about earlier.
So if we take the 84, I hate to say it, but I'm almost inclined to say, 80. Should our target be 98, 90? I don't know, 99. What should it?
Well, my only comment there is that if you, for example, were to target a level at 100%, you have to remember the way we measure that level of value is by arraying the ASRs. If we're at 100%, that implies that half of our sales have values above sale price and half below. Part of the reason we've targeted at 95% is that it brings in the lion's share of the sales with values at or below sale price.
But that's based on the information that we're looking at. I think what Dave and I are talking about is let's get ahead of this. And
Yes.
So-
And I have no problem with that. I'm not sure that we would necessarily want to go 99, 100%, but somewhere in the 97 to 98% realm. How does that sound?
So what is that increase to get to that? You're saying 11, 12, 13%? What is the?
Well, with respect to all of the sales, that's going to be about around a 9 to 10% increase. With respect to the last quarter sales, of course, if you were just focusing solely on the last quarter sales, you'd be talking probably 16, 17%.
I mean, to your point, Harold, at the end of the day, I mean, this is, it's to some degree, it's optics. I guess the way I look at it is if everyone's valued the same way, using the same formula, for lack of a better way to describe it, the tax rate's the tax rate. I mean, everybody's value could double. Doesn't mean you're going to pay double in taxes. It means they're going to adjust the tax rate and back into it. So I know the optics are people are going to see their assessments go up, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're paying more taxes than the person next door or than someone else in a similar style home. So I'd prefer to err on the side of, being conservative and not having to come back and talk about being at, 0.87 next year and having to, do another huge increase. Like David mentioned, and that's going to potentially, it's probably going to be a worse time to do it because the market, not wishing against the market, but at some point it's going to slow down. It's going to end. The market will have potentially turned to some degree the other way. And it's just going to, it's going to be that much tougher for people to swallow, and we're going to be hearing from them. So having said that, I'm not sure where the number should be, but
Yeah, I think John and I basically have the same point. We don't necessarily know the exact number. You'd have to kind of guide us that way, but I think we vote for erring on the side of slightly higher as opposed to slightly lower.
Well, that's good guidance. Yeah.
So how high are you comfortable going, I guess, is the question, maybe, Harold. So we don't, to your point about going to 100% means that 50% are over, sale prices were over. I mean, is 0.98 good? It sounds like 0.99 or 1.0 are too high.
I'd like to see us land somewhere around 97 to 98.
All right, so I'm gonna go with 98 based on our conversation here. John Pink, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, Jim.
Okay, Dave and I kind of hijacked the conversation here. All right, I guess I'll end. So, how should the motion be crafted, Harold? I mean, should it be that we make a motion to set the median for all classes at 0.98?
I would phrase it more in terms of a recommendation. The interim reval process is an interesting one. We go through lots of iterations. We could well see 10 different iterations and attempts to get to a system of land and building rate tables that bring us to that 98%. but also reduce those coefficients of dispersion and get those lined up. And so in that process, that iterative process, it's hard to know exactly what we'll see and encounter that might have us want to temper.
The board directs the principal assessor to strive to have a median of 0.98.
Excellent.
That's the motion. I just made a motion. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
So moved.
I love you, John Pink. Dave, you know he knows what he's doing at this point, right? Okay, so I made the motion. Dave Lamoureux seconded it. John's making fun of us. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Dave Lamoureux,
Aye.
John Pink.
Aye.
And I am in favor as well. Motion carries unanimously. All right, now that I've spent all this time paying attention to you, Harald, my computer screen has gone blank. So what's my next agenda item? I think you have a report on what? It's not your
Okay,
schedule.
so tax rate setting calendar.
Yeah, the calendar.
Yeah, just very generally, that calendar, without looking at target dates, basically looks to have us tabulating our growth here by early September, essentially in the next week or so. We're still waiting for RFC to finish their work on personal property. As soon as that's done, hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have our new growth locked in place. That then allows us to move forward with the interim revaluation process. We'd like to conclude that by early October, come back to you early in October with proposed valuations for FY 2022. You'll see the final statistics lined up with the statistics that you just saw. And then once you're good with those values, then we march down the tax rate setting process. The goal is, I don't know if there are any planned special town meetings, but we like to have approved tax rates no later than Thanksgiving.
There is a potential, I believe, town meeting coming up in the fall, but I'm not so sure it'll be as late as after Thanksgiving. So,
yeah,
but we'll keep an eye on that. So
that's the timetable.
Okay, now for what we've all been waiting for, Harald's schedule. So
yeah, so
what time do you brush your teeth in the morning, and what time do you have breakfast? And this is why we have people watching the Board of Assessors meeting today, for your schedule, Harald.
So you see this gray guy in front of you. I am here to declare that I am not retiring. I may be one of the only people in this profession that hasn't retired in the past year, but I'm not retiring. But what I am doing, my birthday, by the way, if you need to send a nice card with a bottle of scotch or something. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Birthday's next week. I turn the ripe age of 66, and with that, I'm really wanting to find a better balance between work and other interests. I'm first, I want to comment that I'm really delighted with David, who's come on board. He's just really, I think, doing a super job, and he and I have been joined at the hip on making things come together. He will be for the upcoming month the regular, as he has in the past few months, the regular presence here. I will still be connected, but virtually. Beth Ann and I are leaving next week for Europe. We plan on staying there. We have a home over there. We'll be over there until the middle of October, but I'll be working virtually from my dining room table over there. But essentially, leave September 2nd. I'll be back October 15th, but I'll be available for Zoom meetings and, of course, meetings with David throughout the month.
So will David be our point of contact on a daily basis now?
Yes. Yeah, that would be great.
Well, Dave, blame Harald when I'm a pain in the neck to you, so.
Sounds good.
Great. All right, well, we still don't know what time Harald eats breakfast in the morning, but we'll put that on the agenda for next time.
4:30 in the morning. Honestly, 4:30. I'm awake usually at well before that.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're gonna enjoy life a little bit more.
Yeah, if this works out, I don't have a strong motivation to really retire. I love what I do.
Retirement's boring. That's what I've been told by people who keep working. The people who
Yeah.
have retired say it's great, so I don't know which ones to believe.
When the Normans and Davids tell me to pack it up, I'll pack it up.
I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon, so. All right, on to our next agenda item. Do we have any new business that we need to discuss?
So I'm not sure whether to, I guess I'll take it up under old business.
Okay, no new business. I think Harald's got some old business.
Yeah, a tax appeal that I think you've been made aware of. David reached out for an appraisal, which I think, David, have you sent that off to the board members? Yes.
It did, yeah. It went out.
So with that, I'd ask you to review that appraisal. I have a meeting with John Frank, our resident MAI, in the morning to talk about that appraisal and how it speaks, if it speaks to the valuation of a property under appeal.
So what I was going to interject here is that obviously it's an abatement, so we can only talk so much about it. But my thought was, we all have copies of it now. It only came in a couple of days ago. What I think may be prudent of us to do is have us peruse and take a look at it. But more importantly, you need to talk to, and then maybe schedule an executive session call with just us over the next couple of weeks, which I'm assuming you can do whether you're here or in Germany or whatever the case may be, and figure out what our thoughts are, because at some point soon after that, we're going to need to have an executive session to make a determination on whether we grant the abatement or not. And I know that the abating party is interested in presenting or the information as well. So if everyone's good with that, I think at some point after Labor Day, obviously, in the next couple of weeks, we should circle back. You'll have had a chance to review and have some information for us, and we'll have had a chance to look through it too. But I think your guidance and information is going to be a little more relevant than what we're going to be able to pull out of that appraisal based on the property that we're talking about. Does that sound like a plan to everyone? Everyone good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Any other old business? All right, look at this. 5:30 on the dot. So I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn, because at 5:30 in some households, it's considered dinner time.
Second.
I don't eat dinner until 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, but I know there are folks out there, not my grandparents, God rest their souls, who do like to eat early. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
You're pulling a pink now. I said I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. John, you going to make the motion?
So moved.
There you go. David seconded it. We'll get this straight at some point. All in favor, Dave Lamoureux.
Aye.
John Pink.
Aye.
And I am in favor as well. Meeting is adjourned at 5:30 p.m. Thank you very much, guys.